All right. Hey guys, I'm Micah.
I'm Aaron.
Welcome to Love People Enough Road Edition, on the Road Edition. So we're doing some appointments. We got some daily appointment stuff going on every day. So we're going to try to make best use of that time and record some stuff, talk about some stuff. So we're going to play a Miera K video. Aaron doesn't know who she is just yet. I'm a big fan. She looks like she's late 20s or 30s, something around there. American husband, American child. She talks a lot about Israel stuff, radical Islam, the plight of the Jewish people, insane lies, craziness of Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, all the kind of stuff that drives me crazy as well. You know, Mira K's had her channel up for 6 months. That's it. Yesterday, I was telling Aaron just like a day or two that she was just hitting 100K. She actually hit 100K yesterday. She put out her video yesterday, 100K in 6 months. And her whole thing is she just posts a couple videos a day. It's just her face, and she's just talking about something crazy going on. Passionate young woman, huge fan. I just checked, and she is at 102,000 subscribers. Aaron and I gained 2 subscribers yesterday.
We love those two.
Hell of a 2 subscribers. Love those 2 people. Miera K gained 2,000 subscribers in one day, Aaron. One day.
2,000.
Holy,
What's the difference?
that's impressive. So anyway, so we're gonna play one of Miera K's Iran videos. In case you guys don't know what's going on in Iran, there have been massive uprisings and protests for about a week or so. Basically, the population had enough. They're tired of being, jailed, beaten, raped, murdered, everything in between, having no real rights whatsoever under brutal, radical Islamic rule. Yeah, pretty bad stuff. So a couple days back, President Trump put out a text in full support of the Iranian people, a message on Twitter, something along those lines. We'll pull it up here, that said basically, fight back. Iranian people, fight back. Fight against these overseers, right? Help is coming, as he put it. Help is coming. So more and more people have come to the streets, and they're risking their lives. Many of them are losing their lives. Reports from hospitals show over 16,500 people have been killed already. They've had over 7,000 eye injuries, and that's because the radical Islamists in charge of Iran are shooting people in the face in order to blind them. This is a tactic they've used for years. So we've got 7,000 plus eye injuries, and many of those are people who are fully blind for the rest of their life. We've got nearing, soon enough, close to 20,000 people murdered already. The reports are that there's something to the effect of over 300,000 people have been injured by the Iranian Guard.
Not to mention cops running someone up against a wall, their motorcycle, and running over their head.
Do you hear that? Smushing someone against a wall and running their head over. That's the kind of stuff these people are going through right now. We got people getting their eyes shot out, people getting murdered and killed in their homes. Just terrible stuff. Trump came out, he said, if Iran is basically executing their people, help's coming. Something big's gonna happen. So Trump 100% lied to everyone. He's completely abandoned the Iranian people.
Help is on its way? Well, where is it, Mr. President? How is it acceptable to you, Mr. President, that more than 16,000 people were murdered in the streets, yet you are claiming a success because 800 executions were supposedly canceled, something which even the regime itself is now denying ever happened? But here's the thing. If you're not prepared to step up and act when you tell people to take to the streets and risk their lives to overthrow a brutal regime, then you really shouldn't have said anything at all. Even if you're planning action, even if there is a grand plan and we don't see it yet. Words from a president are not cheap. So when the president of the United States speaks, his words carry more weight than any other voice on earth. More than Prime Minister Netanyahu, more than the Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, because President Trump has more ability to shape these events than any single person alive. And he also has the full might of the strongest military in the world. And that means, yes, he has a moral obligation to understand the consequences of mixed signals. My own sources in Iran that I've spoken to throughout this week have told me that they've never seen such levels of violence and brutality in their lives. And what does the Islamic Republic do after slaughtering its own people? It blames everyone else, of course. It claims foreign interference. Well, they're the ones importing violence of their own. The regime brought in 5,000 Arab terrorists from Iraq to help murder Iranians on Iranian soil. And yet still we hear diplomacy is the preferred option. Are you delusional? If your response to the mass murder of 16,500 civilians at the hands of their own government is negotiations, you are not a peacemaker. You're an accomplice.
So Trump just failed an entire country's worth of people.
You know,
And real quick, you know how I feel about what he did to the people of Afghanistan. So this is the second country, and we're going to hit Venezuela soon as well. What you got, bud?
so it reminds me of a scene in Braveheart where William Wallace teams up with, I don't know who it was, another force, and they go into battle expecting the other army to come in and bail them out. And right when he looks at them to come in,
Yeah,
he just turns his head and they walk away.
I remember it. I remember it. That was a powerful movie growing up.
Yeah.
My best friend and I back in the day, Zephyr, if you're out there, buddy, I still love you, man. I'd love to catch back up with you sometime. Oh, yeah, it was one of our favorite movies growing up. I still remember, at that very end when he screams, freedom! Oh, tell me you didn't feel that in your soul, And then who are we now? We're a shameful country right now. I am ashamed to be American again and again and again. And so much of that shame is under Trump. And as we've talked about, if you all know me, I lean right. That means I don't subscribe to the Republican Party. I can't do it. But I do lean right.
I'm a registered independent, but I lean left on economic policies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here we go. Let's talk a little bit about... So Miera K's got a lot more information about maybe the bigger picture, if you will. Now, it hurts when the bigger picture means... But Trump tells people to fight for their lives, and then he abandons them. Wow, it's just so evil. How many of these people have been raped and murdered and killed, waiting for Trump to come save them? Shame on America, shame on Trump, and shame on every Republican who stood by on this. You too, Steve Witkoff. You should be ashamed of yourself. All right, here we go. We're going to pull up some Miera K. We're going to get a little bit more information about what's going on.
It's late at night and all over my feed, reports of the Iranian airspace shutting start to surface. The Pentagon is ready and pilots are in flight. An imminent U.S. attack on the Islamic regime is about to happen. All over the world, people are holding their breath. And then, in the last minute, Trump cancels it. No attack, no intervention. Iran reopens its airspace, and a press release is given by Trump, who announces that the Islamic regime has stopped all the murders and executions, and so the intervention is unnecessary. Well, that's the official excuse. But the real story is very different. It's Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE that have asked him to stop the attack. It's not just an ask. They actively deny access to their airspace, and in Qatar's case, forbid them from using their U.S. base on Qatar soil to launch the attack. Why are the nations that have feared Iran for decades now acting as its primary shield against American intervention? In the Middle East, there are always many, many more layers to a story that are often untold, which is exactly what we are going to do today. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves. To truly understand this, we need to start at the beginning. This is the Miera K Show on JNS TV. Let's do it.
So we froze there for just a second, but imagine that. So we got the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. So we just recently decided to sell the world's most advanced stealth fighter jets to Saudi Arabia. a country who had the most people involved in the greatest attack on American soil, 9/11. So that's Trump. So Trump decided to sell the world's most dangerous and advanced. Aaron will say it again. It doesn't have all the same technology in it, and I know he's correct there, but still. So Trump just decided we were going to sell them these dangerous weapons, knowing that it might very directly be used against our ally Israel in the East. Okay. That's pretty bad. Qatar, who has housed the billionaire leaders of Hamas and other terror groups for what, 10 years plus. They have protected the world's richest terrorist leaders responsible for so much death and destruction, to include American citizens and citizens from every single country out there. So Trump, because they gave Trump a big, $300 million gold airplane, Trump decided that we're going to host the Qatari Air Force on American soil. Qatar, we have intelligence for years now that shows how that they are essentially, next to Iran, the world's greatest funder of terror. But under Trump, he doesn't care. Now, these are the people who have paid a fortune, and that money has gone directly to kill Americans. Trump doesn't care. Trump says, I love Qatar, gives them NATO-level security guarantees, protection now against the world. And what a shocker. And now they say you can't use our airspace to take out a man responsible, this guy in his government, the Ayatollah. These guys fund and train Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and countless other small terrorist groups. And so they're saying, we're not going to let you take out the people who have enslaved the Persians, who have caused an endless amount of bloodshed, death, and destruction all around the Middle East. This is the world that we're in right now. This is what... and this doesn't count what he just did with Venezuela, taking out Maduro and refusing to let the actual leader, Machado, take her democratically elected leader, claiming that she doesn't have the support amongst her people. She won 90% of the primary. She had to flee the country for her life. She was going to get killed by Machado. She has another guy stand in for her for the 2024 elections, wins. So Trump takes Maduro out and says Machado, the duly elected, the actual leader of the country, is not popular. And then you say, why would you do such a scumbag thing and not help this woman take power? You would be beloved by the Venezuelan people. You would be beloved by her as leader. The deals you would now be able to make are probably off the charts. And so we say, we're not going to do that. We're going to let the vice president be the president. The vice president, who's a radical, Jew-hating psychopath. And now we're already making deals with her. And now we're saying that Qatar is going to be involved in holding a portion of this money. Why? Why would that happen? Everything screams corruption.
Makes no sense.
So we just betrayed all of the Venezuelan people. This is after Trump betrayed all of Afghanistan. This is after he betrayed the Kurds in Syria. He's just betrayed all of the Iranian people. This is what's happening right now, and this is why we're threatening to take Greenland by military force. Absolutely sickening. Absolutely sickening stuff. All right, here we go. Let's get back to Miera K. But at least you all know how I feel about what's going on right now. You want to say anything about any of that? I know I just ranted for like 20 minutes straight.
It's not connected as in a policy. It's just random acts that seem to fluff up accounts and self-fulfilling dreams. Nothing is connected in terms of a policy, and nothing he says can be held truthful. It's just really disconnected. The logic doesn't flow through. So there is no policy. It's whatever he wants.
It's whatever he feels like at the moment. And let's not forget, he let Hamas out from those caves that they were hiding in, about to get wiped off the face of the earth by Israel. He let the remaining forces out, allowed them to conduct security. He allowed the terrorist organization Hamas, responsible for killing women by shooting nails into their privates, chopping breasts off and throwing them into the street and kicking them, for example. He let them conduct security. What did they do when they came out? They didn't get killed by the good guys, Israel. Instead, they killed all the good guys who were foolish enough to speak up while they were trapped, thinking that they were going to be saved by Trump. Trump tells them, they decide they're going to break their word. Of course, they're not going to disarm, obviously, because you're such a, I don't know what the word is for a man who believes terrorists. You're not the master. You're not the master of the art of the deal. I can tell you that. You should never be allowed to make a single deal for the rest of your life if you think terrorists tell the truth, right? It's insane. So he tells them like a week and then 2 weeks later, if you don't disarm, bad stuff's coming your way. They just ignore him. This is a joke. This is a joke because all of radical Islam knows he is a joke. And so now Hamas has been freed for 2 months, just back at it, rebuilding again. And so now America, along with the rest of the world, is now complicit in the next war that the Jews have to fight for their very existence. Because every single time the world says, oh, the poor radical terrorist Palestinians, oh, poor them, woe is them. It's outrageous. Do you all know what radical Islam is? Do you all have any idea what a radical Islamist is? So I'm going to take this moment here to pop a few things on the screen. So, hey, you guys remember 9/11? Yeah, radical Islam. You remember when people got their heads chopped off in Syria? Radical Islam. You remember when ISIS was spreading across the Middle East, raping and torturing and mutilating and destroying? Radical Islam. We've had something like, I don't remember the exact stat, but it's somewhere around 70 and 80,000 terror attacks since 9/11 across the world. Radical Islamic terror attacks. Imagine, I think the number was, it was up to 2024, it was something like 70 something thousand. So by 2026, probably hit 80,000, somewhere close to that. We'll say low estimate number, 70,000. 70,000 radical Islamic terror attacks across the world. And the world can't seem to figure out that the Jews are not the bad guys. And our country says, let's now sell advanced weaponry to Saudi Arabia, people who had the most hijackers involved in 9/11. Most people involved in the attack on our country were from Saudi Arabia. Okay. Turkey, who hates Israel and wants to wipe them off the face of the earth, an incredibly anti-Semitic country. We're selling them F-35s now as well. Okay. We're now protecting Qatar, the greatest funder of terror in the world, while repeatedly, so we stopped Israel from killing Khomeini a couple months back. I don't know if it was a month or two back, whatever that was. We had the opportunity. We knew who it was. We refused to stop it. We stopped Israel from doing it. We saved that monster's life. Then we betray the Iranian people. I promise we'll get back to it, guys. I just have to rant for a minute. I need you all to know where I stand on this type of stuff. From a man who leans red, I am so ashamed of my country. I'm so ashamed of what we are doing to these people. And if you can somehow justify all that in your brain, you are brain broken. Because as far as I'm concerned, right is right, good is good, wrong is wrong. I don't know how you say we're going to come fight for your country, Iranians, help is coming. And then you just change your mind and that's a wrap. Meanwhile, we've got over 300,000 injured, close to 20,000 killed, 7,000+ and counting blinded. And this is a place where they have no media now, right? They can't communicate properly with each other. These people are living in terror. When is the world going to rise up? Someone elect Micah for president. This is my vice president right here. Make no mistake, I will wipe radical Islam from the face of this earth. alongside my vice president here. These are radicals, okay? Make no mistake. Want to be very crystal clear. Make no mistake. We'd probably try to partner with countries like the UAE, for example, the most moderate versions. But all right, here we go. It's back to Miera K. 20 minutes of Micah rambling. Here we go.
So we're going to start back in 1971. The US is in trouble. It's losing the Vietnam War and it's broke, really broke. And they are still locked in a Cold War against Russia. To make matters worse, the British Empire has just packed up and left the Gulf of Iran, leaving the world's leading oil supply unmanned. This creates a massive power vacuum that the Americans are terrified the Soviets are gonna fill. Iran's location controls the energy flow to Europe and Asia, as we have previously discussed, and if Russia takes control of that, it's catastrophic for the West. Someone needs to oversee it. But since the US can't afford to deploy 100,000 troops, they come up with a twin pillars strategy. And here's the deal that they struck. It's a division of labor. Pillar number one is with Iran. They're the muscle. Washington is looking at the Shah of Iran and sees a secular, ambitious leader who wants to recreate the Persian Empire. So they sold him their most advanced weaponry, tanks, destroyers, and most famously the F-14, which was the most sophisticated fighter jet on Earth, and the only country allowed to fly them, besides the US, is now Iran. In return, the Shah's job is to patrol the waters, keep the shipping lanes open, and make sure the Soviets don't get any ideas. Pillar number two of this twin pillar strategy is Saudi Arabia. They are the bank. They don't have the population to field a massive army like Iran, but they have something else: spiritual legitimacy. They can fight against communist ideals with their religion, stopping it from spreading across the Arab nations. But more importantly, they have unlimited cash. Their job is to keep the Arab world anti-communist and stabilize the oil markets. In the 1970s, almost every oil country, like Iran, have huge populations to feed, so they're pumping every drop of oil they can just to pay their bills. They have zero flexibility. Saudi Arabia, however, is different. Because they have a tiny population and massive reserves, they can afford to lead millions of barrels in the ground, and this gives them the spare capacity. If Iran tries to blackmail the US by raising prices, let's say, Saudi Arabia can just turn on a valve, flood the market with their spare oil, and crash the price. Effectively, they are the ones who control the price of oil. It's important to note that their king, too, is forward-thinking. He's no friend to Israel, but he sees the Russians as the ultimate threat to Islam, and he realizes that the US are good allies for him to have, so they can offer him solutions to real issues he is facing in Saudi Arabia. In 1974, they formalized this. The US Treasury secretly fly to Riyadh to close what is now known as the Petro-dollar agreement. It's pure genius in its simplicity, but it's also something that drastically impacts the world till this day, and most people don't even know about it. The terms are pretty straightforward. The US agreed to provide absolute military security to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and, crucially, to use the US Army of Engineers to modernize the countries, building their military bases, ports, and universities, and transforming them from a desert to a superpower. Remember, this is a time when Arab monarchies are falling like flies. You've got Egypt, etc., and the Saudis want protection against that. In exchange for this protection, the Saudis agreed to price all oil sales in US dollars and to invest their surplus profits back into the US Treasury bonds. So what does that mean for those of us who are not obsessed with economics? The Saudis, having the most surplus of oil, set the rules of the game. And by pricing the oil in dollars, they effectively force every country in the world that wants to buy oil to need to do so in dollars. This suddenly makes the dollar high in demand, which in turn stabilizes the US economy. This is true till this day. You know how you might live in a different country, but you still know how much the dollar is worth? This is due to the petrodollar system. Every country has to own dollars to be able to interact with the oil market. And then in turn, because they have dollars, they also use it for other things to fuel their economy. The Saudis, in return for the tech and protection, gave the US back its economic stronghold. They also invested all of the extra cash they had in the US, giving the US room to grow and develop because it was a lot of cash. Interestingly enough, because the US supported Israel, the Saudis didn't want to be seen as Zionists. So this is all done in complete secret, with the US building out secret entities just for them that weren't traceable in the same way. Whatever. That's a story for another time. It's starting to make sense now why the relationships with the Saudis is much more crucial than we have all been led to believe. But I am getting ahead of myself. Because with the US economy stabilized, the Saudis are strong, and Iran's military abilities are growing, it seems like all is well. Until 1979, the year that everything falls apart, like we've discussed in our previous episode. The muscle, the Shah of Iran, collapses. The US watches in horror as their strongest ally in the region, who was overseeing the oil, is now overthrown. Not by a Soviet army, but by a religious revolution led by the Ayatollah Khomeini, our best friend. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but we have to be a little bit honest. This was largely due to a terrible miscalculation by the United States. By the late 70s, Washington was actually becoming a little bit sick of the Shah. He was becoming arrogant and hiking up oil prices to fund his own ego and ignoring American advice, so the Carter administration made a fatal gamble. They looked at the opposition and thought, maybe we can work with these new guys. Maybe getting rid of the Shah is not the worst thing, and they were insanely wrong. They didn't get a better partner. They got a regime that took 52 American diplomats hostage and declared the US the Great Satan, and we know the rest of that story. Now, remember all of the tech we had gifted Iran in return for protection against the Soviets? This is now in the hands of the crazy Ayatollah. The billions of dollars of top-tier American technology we had poured into Iran are now in the hands of an enemy. So the Shah falls, and suddenly Washington and Saudi Arabia are staring at the same nightmare scenario. They weren't just afraid of Iran being mean to its population. They're afraid of two very specific things that are threatening the Western world order. Number one, the new Iranian regime wasn't just a government, it's a cause. As we've discussed, Ayatollah Khomeini openly declares that the monarchy is anti-Islamic. By him taking over Iran and deposing the king, the Shah, he's broadcasting a message to the people of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Bahrain, who are very religious. Your kings are corrupt American puppets. Rise up and overthrow them like we did. The Saudis are terrified. They saw Iran as a virus that could infect their own population and dissolve their borders. That's a threat that they're not happy with. But there's also the logistical nightmare that now comes with this. This is really the American fear. Look at a map of the Persian Gulf. There's a tiny narrow exit door at the bottom called the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 30% of the world's seaborne oil passes through that door every single day. If Iran controlled both sides of the Gulf, they could simply lock the door. They could freeze the economies of Europe, Japan, and the US overnight. And so the agenda that the US and Saudis come up with is ruthless. It's about containment. They realize that they can't invade Iran. It was too big and the mountains are too rugged. Instead, they have to basically bleed the revolution dry. They have to keep the Iranian military so busy fighting for its life that it wouldn't have the energy to topple any other governments. And the solution? They find themselves a contractor. Right next door was Saddam Hussein of Iraq. He was a secular dictator who hated the religious fanatics in Iran. So in a cynical move, the US and Saudi Arabia effectively back him to start a war. Saudi Arabia provide the cash, as they always do, billions of dollars, and the US provide the intel, the tech, the satellite imagery. They don't necessarily want Saddam Hussein to win. They just want Iran to lose. And for 8 brutal years, 1980 to 1988, it works. The war acted as a pressure valve, trapping the Iranian revolution inside its own borders and keeping the oil flowing through the strait. But once the war ended, the US realized something a little bit problematic. You can't just keep hiring local dictators to do your dirty work. Eventually, they might go rogue, which, as you might remember, Saddam Hussein did. He was a terrible person, and not somebody that you remember as a friend to the US, despite the fact that the US had backed him. So in 1990, the US make a decision to shift their strategies, and that kind of brings us to today. They stop hiring contractors and move themselves into the neighborhood. And this marks the shift we have all become familiar with. Hundreds of thousands of US troops on the ground throughout the Middle East. Most people just leave it at that. They think the US intervention in the region is simply about America wanting the oil, but in truth, it's much more complicated. It's about the dollar. We have to understand that the US Saudi relationship isn't just a military alliance, it is the engine room of the American economy. Back in 1974, this deal that was struck is still impacting us till this day. Yes, it was pure genius in its simplicity, but it's vital for the US global power. This is the way that the dollar stays strong. It's based on the Saudis. America's willingness to protect the royal family wasn't altruistic. It was based on them refunding and putting those billions of dollars back into the US Treasury. This is how the US runs massive deficits and doesn't crash its economy. The Saudis create, till this day, a constant global demand for that dollar, and they fund the US government's debt. So when the US sends troops to the Middle East, they aren't just protecting oil wells, they are protecting the value of the currency in your wallet. But over the last few years, the Saudis have realized that this protection part of the deal might be a lie, which is why a moment that happened in 2019 is kind of pretty crucial. In the early hours of the morning of September, a swarm of Iranian-made drones and cruise missiles slammed into Saudi Arabian oil processing facilities. It was a devastating precision strike that knocked out almost 50% of Saudi Arabia's oil production in minutes. The Saudis, remembering their deal, looked to the White House, expecting the full force of the US military to retaliate against Iran. After all, that was the deal. We give you the oil market and you give us protection. But the response was a little bit shocking. Trump basically said that the attack was unfortunate. It's an attack on Saudi Arabia and not the United States, and so we don't really want to intervene. He kind of hesitated. And ultimately, there was no proper American counterstrike.
Yeah, go ahead.
But so again, this gets back to there's a book called On War by Clausewitz, and he talks about how war is merely an extension of politics. There are many other non-war political tools available, controlling the economy, land, resources, policies, agreements, things like that that you can do before you have to actually go to war. And war should be the last ditch effort. All other means of diplomacy have failed, so we go to war. Well, as we'll see here, I believe coming up, the implications of not supporting Saudi Arabia.
Absolutely. And so once again here, what a shocker. Trump does the wrong thing. So Trump refuses to abide by the agreement that they have.
That was placed in 1990.
Yeah.
So it is dated, however.
It is dated. However, it's still on the books. It's still valid. It still matters. And by not doing that, by not protecting them, we're about to see what happens as a result of that. And that's going to set the stage for us most likely eventually betraying and abandoning the Iranian people today.
In that moment, the calculus in Saudi Arabia shifted. They realized that they were vulnerable and that their entire economic future, their Vision 2030, the trillion-dollar project to move away from oil dependency and build futuristic cities like Neom, was sitting in a glass house. You see, the Saudis understand that oil is becoming less and less important. Right now, of course, oil is very important. But with time, as green energy comes in, countries are going to need other things to fuel their economy. And the Saudis are banking on building a global tourism and tech hub. But if there are Iranian missiles raining down on your airports, tourism and tech isn't really going to develop. They realize that if the US wouldn't fight Iran, they need to appease Iran. And this is where things get a little bit dangerous. As we'd mentioned, Saudi Arabia and Iran were enemies, definitely ideologically, when Khomeini came in. But now the Saudis realize, wait a second, maybe being on the side of the West isn't exactly the smartest thing for us. Maybe we're better off brokering some sort of peace deal with Iran so that we're in safe territory. In March 2023, Saudi Arabia and Iran signed a deal to restore relations, but it wasn't brokered by the US. It was brokered by Beijing, China. The Saudis took out an insurance policy. They know Iran relies on China to buy a huge amount of its oil. By bringing Beijing in as the guarantor, the Saudis effectively ensured that if Iran attacks them, Iran is defying its own economic lifeline. But here's the catch. Note who they chose as their partner. The Saudis are quietly shifting directions. Whilst they had focused on the West and America as being their partner, they're now looking at the Chinese and the Iranians, which is something that the Americans notice. This is a bit problematic. Keep in mind, by the way, that the deal that Saudi Arabia has with Iran to protect its own location is with the current regime. If the US attacks and topples the Ayatollah, if there is a regime change, the Saudi-China deal becomes void. The Saudis look at the fall of the mullahs and they don't really see liberation for the Iranian people, who they couldn't care less about. They see chaos that would ruin their economy. So, ironically, the Saudis have become the primary defenders of the status quo in Iran. This is deeply worrying for the US. If the Saudis are now looking to China and Qatar for protection, they don't need the petrodollar deal anymore. If they start selling oil in yuan, the American economic superpower status is in real danger. But obviously, it gets more complicated. If you were to look at a map of the ideologies of the Middle East, the Saudis, although not Western, have traditionally been aligned with the UAE, Dubai. Both nations were the anti-Islamist bloc, and that was significant because they are a massive portion of the Middle East. They're the forward-thinking, modernizing autocracies that view groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas as threat to their rule. On the other side, you had Iran and Qatar. They were different. They were the patrons of political Islam. Qatar hosts the Muslim Brotherhood, Iran backs Hamas and Hezbollah. For decades, Saudi Arabia and the UAE were locked in a pro-stability alliance to keep the Islamist revolutionary axis at bay. But as of a few weeks ago, the architecture has shifted. A headline most of us missed has taught us a suspicious new direction for the Saudis, which, if you were looking, you may have started to notice back in 2023. They are suddenly starting to make enemies with their old friends in the UAE and cozying to Qatar. What about this? Well, reports surfaced of Saudis backing forces actually clashing with the UAE-backed separatists in southern Yemen. It wasn't just a skirmish, it's a symptom of a much, much deeper problem. The Saudis and the Emiratis are now bitter economic rivals, competing for the same foreign capital and regional status. The Saudis feel that the UAE is undercutting them, and to stabilize themselves as the superior force in the Middle East, they've decided that it's time to cut that relationship with the UAE. But it's not just the UAE that they are leaving. They are leaving the Western mentality by cozying to China, to Qatar, who can help them tremendously with funding if their 2030 project goes wrong. They are in many ways joining a side that is very problematic. It's also an indicator of a much more worrying track for the next few years, because the Saudis are worried that their financial overhaul isn't happening fast enough, and they are looking for new friends who can offer different things. This is where Qatar enters the picture.
So this is something that is a problem with having an isolationist type view. And not understanding global politics. I've said this for a long time, even when Trump was first in office. He has no foreign policy. It is not a strict policy and guideline. Again, it's chaotic and seemingly random. Unless I don't know, which is possible. But this is the problem with being an isolationist as an American. We're in global trade, a global world. And if we just pack up our toys and just play by ourselves, we're going to be alone on an island quickly.
And we'll have allowed the bad guys to kind of make all the rules. And even our version of isolation will kind of be at their mercy, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Qatar shares a massive gas field with Iran, and because of this geography, Qatar has always maintained a working relationship with Iran, acting as a bridge. By pivoting towards Qatar and away from the UAE, Saudi Arabia is effectively trying to buy safety. They are aligning with the Qatar-Iran axis, not because they like them ideologically, but because Qatar can mediate with Iran to keep their kingdom safe from attack. This is much, much, much more worrying for the US. I'm not saying if the Saudi and Qatar shift is the sole reason the US held back on attacking Iran. It looks like an insufficient answer on its own, but I will say this. This marks a very big shift in the geopolitics of the Middle East that, of course, then impacts the US. The Saudis are moving away from the American security umbrella and towards a regional integration model with their former enemies.
It reminds me a little bit of after the fall of Afghanistan, where because we betrayed them so terribly, I remember reading a story about this, military guy trained by America, loved his country, fought for his family, fought for his country, secular Islamist, right? And when we betrayed them, the only thing he knew, and many others like him who found themselves in the same situation, was that because we had now betrayed them, they had no protection for himself or his family. So this honorable man, trained by America, loved his country, loved his family, loved freedom. He joined ISIS just so that him and his family wouldn't be massacred by the Taliban when they came back in. That's what we did to them.
Yeah.
Trump did that. I don't care how bad Biden screwed it up. Trump made a deal with the Taliban. Even if the withdrawal had gone perfectly, they betrayed every single thing every part of the deal that they made.
Mhm.
It made no difference that the Blues did it poorly. It made no difference. Trump betrayed our allies. He got the majority of them killed, captured, and those who weren't killed or captured had to join radical Islamic groups because it was the only way to save themselves. I can feel the similarities right here. We betray Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia realizes they can't trust America, and now they're in the hands and the pockets
They're in
side
bed
by
with
side with China and Iran. And now the same man who caused that all to happen, both those situations, has now betrayed the entire country of Iran, all the people there as well.
And it's not being talked about enough. Like, keep in mind the fact that the Saudis made a deal with Iran that they would lose if the regime changes. They don't want this regime to change, even if it's terrible. It's another reason they aren't excited about this, even if it means that it's the downfall of their once ideological enemy. Ideologies get in the way when finances are being attacked. As always, the media is negligent.
So this is a thing that is, I believe, completely underrated and not understood by most people, is the power of the economy.
Mm.
Having a strong US dollar, being able to control oil prices based on the dollar. Economics are hugely powerful. We talk about, level of war and diplomacy. Having a huge, strong economy is very important. Who else has a very huge, strong economy? China.
Yeah.
Yep.
Giving you pieces of the story but not connecting the bigger dots. You've probably seen about 100 articles about how the US should intervene in Iran, but bets are that part of the story has been missed from the narrative. Have you even heard of the petrodollar? Why talk about the main decision factor when we could focus on personality politics instead? Now, all of this is important, but it still doesn't explain why I, as an Israeli, am speaking about this. Have no fear. It all makes sense. You see, I'm interested in the question of where this leaves Israel, because we have to look past the headlines. Whilst the media is focusing on whether a Saudi-Israel peace treaty is on or off, the real game is quietly happening underground. We know that public normalization is currently stuck. You can't be best friends with Israel whilst you're busy appeasing the Iranian regime. But Israel realized years ago that in this neighborhood, you cannot rely on diplomatic smiles or signed pieces of paper. You need leverage. You need to be essential. And this is where the strategy that we are currently seeing comes into play. Despite their leverage over the US, the Saudis still have a massive geographical vulnerability. Their entire economy relies on exporting oil. And right now, that oil is trapped between two dangerous choke points: the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf and the one in the Red Sea. Both are effectively controlled by Iran or its proxies. And if a war starts and those straits close, the Saudi economy stops. China can't fix that. Qatar can't fix that. But you've guessed correctly. Israel is the only one who can. for the last 2 years behind closed doors, and whilst we have been fighting on multiple fronts, Israel has been laying the groundwork to connect the Saudi pipeline network to the Israeli one. Remember, Israel has access to Europe. This infrastructure creates a secure route that bypasses the Iranian Navy entirely, sending Saudi oil and AI and data directly to the Mediterranean and into Europe. This creates a new reality. The Saudis might pivot to China for political cover, but their physical economic lifeline to the West now runs through Israel. This is, by the way, how you build stability in the Middle East. Not through warm feelings and summits, but through cold, hard necessity. The Saudis don't have to love us. They just have to need us. And right now, Israel is positioning itself as the one asset that the kingdom cannot survive without. And honestly, the genius of it cannot be overstated. We hear Prime Minister Netanyahu making public statements about moving away from dependency on the US, and most people think he's just talking about ammunition shipments or the UN vetoes, but it is a bit deeper than just military aid. It's about realizing that the economic future of the world might just be located right here in the Middle East. And in that future, hedging your bets to be perceived as an indispensable friend rather than a charity case is the name of the game. And to think that this infrastructure strategy was being planned in advance during a multi-front war is just beyond me. While the IDF were fighting in Gaza and Lebanon, the strategists have been laying the groundwork for the next 50 years of economic dominance. This is pure genius. So where does this leave us now? In a complicated and uncertain new dynamic. We have to understand that Trump buddying up with Qatar and Saudi Arabia is more intentional than we had previously thought. Making an enemy of them isn't simple. Their decision impacts every American, whether Americans realize it or not. And if they're going to be moving towards more anti-Western ideologies, Americans should probably know that their top-notch weaponry is being sent to these people, like in the case with Iran. It's a bet. And unfortunately, it's one that isn't that unfamiliar to Americans. But quietly, Israel is hedging its bets too. We're moving away from being completely reliant on the West and the US as our sole defenders. Instead, we're building out our own long-term insurance policies for security, and we aren't the only ones. Look at the United States. Why do you think there is suddenly a decision to go after Venezuelan oil? Because Washington doesn't want the dependency on the shaky Gulf allies anymore either. It is all very up in the air, but these are exciting times. As we have said from the very beginning, the Middle East is the most interesting place in the world, and the lesson here is clear. We shouldn't be fighting to ask for favors. We shouldn't be begging for alliances. We should be setting the leverage to ensure that our potential enemies are actually dependent on us. And that is exactly what is happening. We are moving away from dependency on the US and into a relationship of semi-equals. The shekel is doing very well, and we are doing the same with the Saudis. We aren't asking them to like us. We're just making sure they can't live without us. And that kind of works to me. I'm Miera K, and I'll see you next time.
So, very complicated situation. Obviously, a lot of moving parts and pieces. Her logic seems generally sound. My only concern is the humanitarian piece.
Yeah, which doesn't seem to be relevant in any way whatsoever with our current administration.
Correct.
None. Not even.
But that's not a world I want to live in.
That's not a world I want to live in either. I completely agree. I mean, kind of like I've said before, I have a hard time with justifications that right and wrong ends on the other side of a line. That's very difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I realize that gets very complicated in the realm of other countries very quickly. But I don't think the answer is to continue to let dictators and radical Islamists rule the world, butcher their people, continue to isolate more and more, act so dishonorably in front of our allies and our enemies that no one trusts us, and continue to undermine millions and millions of people in country after country after country. Even to such an extent, like I said, of Trump giving the Iranian people hope that help was coming and then just abandoning them all. What he's doing is damaging the reputation on a scale never seen before, I think, in American history. It's not in my lifetime. It's hard to see how we will not be pariahs of the world after this is over. And that's not to say that Trump's not doing some incredible work at the same time, all overshadowed by the evil that he does, all it's such a shame, you know. Yeah, those are just some of my thoughts. So that's the Miera K, and I thought was a very informative and well-spoken episode.
Very eloquent.
Oh, very, absolutely.
Very
Yeah.
well spoken.
Wonderful, incredible human being. Huge fan myself. Please consider subscribing to her. She's amazing. Yeah.
And us.
Oh yeah, and us while
Yeah,
you're at it,
please,
Jesus, because we don't get 2,000 people a day, okay? So we can just get. Just say we'll settle for anything that you're willing to subscribe our direction. Yeah, please. Let's give us some subscriptions.
Love people enough.
Love people enough. Love you guys. We'll see you on the next one. Hey everyone, this is Micah
And this is Aaron.
from Love People Enough. Please consider signing up for our Patreon so we can continue to bring you hard-hitting episodes and grow our channel to reach the widest audience possible. Link below in the description.